Hey, welcome back to another episode of Revealed Apologetics. I'm your host, Eli Ayala, and today we are doing an Ask Us Anything live stream. I am happy to be joined by my good friend, Anthony Rogers, a black belt in apologetics, debater extraordinaire, and it's been a real blessing just consuming a lot of his content and his teaching over the years. And I've had the privilege of watching in person his debate with Trent Horn, which was a few months ago, and that was the same event where I was debating Dan Barker, and it was wonderful. So I'm always learning from you, brother, and I'm so happy to have you here. You want to say hello and maybe tell folks what you're up to before we get started?
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. Good to always be on with you. I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but watching you debate Barker was sort of a special treat for me for reasons. But one is I was actually present in 2001 when he debated Dr. Bonson's protege, Michael Butler.
Oh, wow.
Butler became a professor of mine in 2003 and 4 at Christ College in Lynchburg. And what happened at the event, my wife was pregnant with our first child. And after the debate, I was anxiously waiting to go engage Dan, and my wife wasn't feeling well. So we had to leave right after the debate. So for 20 plus years, I've been over here thinking I didn't get to talk to Barker. I didn't talk to Barker at the debate either, but I just pretended like I was doing this vicariously
Sure.
through you. So
That's funny. That's cool, man. Yeah, that debate was really special to me because I remember listening rather to the debate between Dan Barker and Doug Wilson the year after Dr. Bonson passed away. And so the moderator had said that uh, that Barker was scheduled to debate Bonson, but Bonson passed away. So it was kind of cool because, I've been influenced by Dr. Bonson. And so it's kind of like to be able to do my first formal debate ever with the guy he was supposed to debate. So I would have the opportunity to kind of not only defend the faith, but to also show the presuppositional approach and the context of debate. And it was respectful and lively at moments. And I was really special to do that. And it was quite intimidating too, because Dr. White was in the audience as well. So I got my first public debate, and James White's stand is sitting in the corner over there. So it was a little intimidating, but I thought it went really well, and I was glad that I did it.
and Dan's been at this for decades, so he's a experienced debater.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't think his position is sound, but that doesn't mean he's not practiced and a skilled orator and so forth. So those are all things to consider as you get into a debate.
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Excellent. Well, I thought your debate with Trent Horn was really, really good. The debates in general in that weekend were fantastic. I thought they went really well.
Yeah, Marlon did a really good job. I know other people that have been doing this for a while, and it always seems like there's a bunch of loose ends. But if there were any issues, I didn't notice them.
Mm.
If there were issues, they handled those well, right?
Yeah.
Because something's bound to pop up, but it just seems like they had everything down pat. So
Right.
I know Marlon said after that he's probably not going to do this again. He might. I know how these things work, though. People get the bug again, but I think it's because he put so much work into it. He put so
Yeah.
much work into it. That's why it went well, but that's also why he was exhausted after it all.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. Well, great stuff, man. Well, this isn't Ask Us Anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the link in the comments here. And I don't normally do this. I did it one time before. Let's see here. Let's see. I'm going to put the link there. And if folks want to ask a question, they can join. Christians are welcome. Non-Christians are welcome as well to ask the question. If you want to ask the question in the comments, of course, I'll just pop it up on the screen. But if you want to join us and ask maybe a few questions, we'll try our best to answer them. You make sure you just direct the question to who you're asking. And if I know the answer, I'll let you know. If I don't know the answer, I'll say I don't know. Or if it's something I need to study, I'll say I'll get back to you. So, we can figure this out and see what works best. But before we do that, I want to highlight, and I do apologize for folks maybe getting their question ready, or if they want to come up with us. I am going to show a brief trailer of an event for I think it's May 15, but we'll let the trailer speak for itself. This is an event that Anthony and I will be speaking at in Concord, North Carolina. So I am going to play that, and then after that, we'll start taking questions and things like that. Okay. So let me see if I can get this. I'm going to remove ourselves from the screen real quick.
How should the church respond to the rapid growth of Islam? Ministry to Muslims presents the 5th East Coast, Our Strong Tower Conference, a night dedicated to deep insight and cultural understanding. Taking place on Friday, May 15, 2026 at 6:30 p.m. This event features 3 prominent speakers, Reverend Anthony Rogers, Pastor George Saig, and Eli Ayala. Together, they will navigate the complex intersection of faith, history, and theology. The evening's program includes a delicious Mediterranean dinner and a series of powerful presentations. Topics will cover the personal testimony of a former Muslim, the global implications of Islam's growth for the church, and a critical look at modern religious discourse. This conference will take place in Concord, North Carolina. There is no cost to attend, but it is a limited seating event, so you'll want to secure your spot soon. For those who can't make it in person, additional workshops will be held online on May 16th and 17th. To register, please scan the QR code or visit ministrytomuslims.com. We look forward to seeing you there.
All right, we're going to do that. We're going to do this, and then we're going to do that. All right. Okay, so I'm looking forward to that. If he's talking about that delicious Mediterranean dinner where we went last time, I'm excited because the salmon was delicious.
Oh, it was. You and I
That's
both
right.
got the salmon.
That's right. That's right. Hey, that was really special because that was the first time I met Matt Slick's wife, and she passed away not that far from when we went there. So it was a pleasure to meet her. She was very frail when she was there, but she was there for a little bit. So Matt's going to be coming on to do another kind of Ask Us Anything sort of thing in the near future too. I think he's on the road today, but maybe we can do something where we're all here together and do something fun together. It's always a great time hanging with you guys. So, all right. So I did put the link into the comments. So if anyone wants to ask a question, you can hop on with us. We'll try our best to answer it. And if not, I'll just scroll through these comments and see if there's a question that I'll just pop up on here. But the link is there. Christian or non-Christian, you're more than welcome. If you ask me super hard questions, I'll just punt them over to Anthony. And if he doesn't know it, we'll, I don't know what happens after that. I guess the channel glitches and everything turns off. No, I'm just kidding. So let's see what we got here. Okay. Looks like no one's clicking the link. So I guess we'll just go with the comments. The link is there. So feel free. But Modern Atheism. Hello, Modern Atheism. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Oh, he hopped on. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the super chat anyway. So there we go. All right. Let's hop on there. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
And yourself?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, good.
Good. Hey, I love the accent. Where are you from?
I'm from Colombia.
Colombia. Okay. Oh, Puerto Rican. We can be friends.
Also, yeah. Sorry. Okay.
Yep. So if you have a question, we'll try our best to answer it, and we'll take it from there. Okay, and just let us know who you want to answer, and if I have trouble answering it, maybe Anthony could share his thoughts, and vice versa.
Yeah. So the question is for you, right? Okay. I want to know exactly about this impossibility of the contrary part of the tag argument, and I want here's the thing. Let's say I grant you the tag argument. Let's say I grant you that naturalism cannot ground knowledge, and global skepticism will follow. Let's say I grant you that. So how do you know that must be false? That global skepticism must be false? Like, what is the contradiction there, or what is the problem exactly? Because there are some people that are actually global skeptics. There are some people that actually do hold that position, and they do not think that the worldview is internally obviously contradictory. So what is your issue with that?
Well, if you hold to a global skepticism, you can't argue. Those are the people who can't defend their views. They have to sit back and watch other people who defend their views, because if you're a global skeptic, you can't know anything. So you're going to sit on the sidelines and undermine the very possibility of argumentation. The moment they open their mouth, they're going to contradict their global skepticism. So I would say that there would be a global skeptic who desires to argue and provide some kind of objection to a view. They're going to engage in a performative contradiction with their own perspective. Because once you start opening your mouth, you're going to start making claims that if you don't have knowledge of even the claims you're asserting, then what are you arguing? The Christian would be open to just reject anything you say if the person comes from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, what they will respond to that, they will say, I only have belief, and I am arguing from my belief. I am telling you what I believe, and I think you also have belief. He will also deny that you have knowledge. Obviously, he will deny that you are the one with knowledge and he's the one with belief. He will say, actually, I think all of humans are in the same epistemic boat, and we all have only beliefs, and that's all humans have. That's what they will think, and they will think that this is not 100% certain, but they will say, yeah, this is reasonable, but I grant you that you cannot be certain of that, right?
Yeah, to say that we're all in a global, that's the situation of everybody, then we don't have to accept that, because he doesn't know that.
He believes that, right?
Yeah, but he doesn't even know that he believes it, because to say I know I believe it is to already, you either know that you believe, or you don't know that you believe. So the moment someone starts taking some kind of position and asserting something, even asserting their own skepticism, it's going to be self-vitiating, because you're going to have to stand somewhere even to utter your skepticism.
Okay. Yeah, I see. I don't know. That's an interesting point. Can they say that they believe, or is this like sounds like weird, right?
Yeah, it is weird, because, and I think global skepticism, it's unlivable. Like for example, people say, like, how is the contrary to Christianity contradictory? I'm not stating, and nor is any presuppositionalist stating, that when someone says the proposition, God does not exist, or certainty is impossible, there's nothing logically contradictory of uttering the sentence.
Right.
Going to be the performative contradiction that once someone holds to the view, for example, that I can't have knowledge of anything, once they utter a proposition, then it becomes useless, because you can't argue anything, because you're not standing on anywhere. So even if you say, I don't know, well, do you know you don't know? Well, I don't even know that. So then why are you here? It undercuts rational discourse, which is actually part of the transcendental argument, where we say that when you reject, say, a Christian framework, you undercut the very possibility of argumentation. So I think it's it might be a fun kind of, when someone's trying to conceptualize like a way to respond to tag, it might be like a fun thought experiment. Well, what if I hold to this position? But you can't live that way. You can't function consistently that way. And that's what we say about the unbeliever who rejects a biblical framework. Unbelievers are super smart. You have very intelligent Christians, non-Christians, but they have a disjointed view of reality. They have no unity in their life. And that's why they tend to focus on specific, like, analytical topics, but lack a cogent framework to make sense out of it all. And so that's why I would say, apart from the fact that I think we all need Jesus and we need to repent and believe the gospel, I think when we reject a biblical framework, we have no unity in the world. And standing from that foundation of a lack of unity, they'll then turn around and speak as though they have unity, but then at the other side of their mouth, their worldview entails that they have no unity. How do they bring all these things together? They'll say, oh, knowledge is impossible. Then they'll make knowledge claims. Morality is not objective, but then they call the cops when someone steals their wallet. It's just a complete contradiction in terms of living out that perspective. And so what I would do, and I'll let you respond in just a moment, I would just gently point out that inconsistency. And the reason why there's an inconsistency, I would argue, is that in their heart of hearts, they actually do affirm a coherent kind of understanding of the world, that they don't actually live out the things they say with their mouth, because the Bible says that in your heart of hearts, you do have a knowledge of God, and that's being suppressed in our unrighteousness. So that's kind of how I would take it in terms of fallibilism or global skepticism. I would say that that's an unlivable position. And if someone wants to hold to that, then they wouldn't be up here on the screen. I'm not saying that's you. I don't know what your view is. But if someone were to hop up on the screen, well, I don't think we could be certain of anything. I was like, well, okay, well, nice to meet you. We can't argue then, because anytime you argue, you're going to be asserting certain things.
Yeah, but I was reading about this epistemology thing, and I read that most philosophers today are actually fallibilists. So that's what I read. I don't know. So
Sure.
maybe that's like, maybe they don't see it in the same way that you. They think like, yeah.
Well,
leave it.
I've never counted noses to see how many hold to it, but I would say, and I mean, I'm being sarcastic here. I'm not being disrespectful because I respect philosophers and stuff. If they hold to that, I would say that's their problem. And that's actually a reflection of the disjointed nature of their philosophy. Now, I'm not saying that I know more philosophy than them or I'm smarter than those people, but that's just an expression of lots of, I would argue, unbiblical philosophical frameworks that have no basis to hold their worldview together. So they have to hold to forms of epistemology that reflect that. That's a feature of their rejection or an implicit rejection of a Christian framework. And I would even argue that for Christians who affirm that, say, ultimately we can't really know these things. I would say that even that perspective is inconsistent with the Christian faith that they confess.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Does that make a little sense, even whether you agree or not? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah. You thank me too. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Okay, bye.
All right. Let's see here. Thank you for that. That was such a nice gentleman. See, we could have conversations, right? People could have conversations. I see online there's so many people screaming at each other and going crazy. He was a gentleman. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what we have here. This is a question for you. And again, the link is there. So if anyone wants to hop on, you're free to hop on. But this is for Anthony. Anthony, I saw a short of you going over the logical refutation of Islam from relation. How could Allah give revelation if he is so above relation? Can you expand on that? Long form, anywhere.
Okay, so I'm not sure which point I was making in the clip you refer to, but some things come to mind as stuff I've pointed out in the past. One thing is just, and this is just a very simple line of thought, and it's thoroughly presuppositional, as Eli will eventually say yes to. No, but one of the things you were mentioning, Dr. Bonson passing away a bit ago, and one of the things I always lamented is that we didn't have somebody like Dr. Bonson applying presuppositionalism to Islam. That was something I was much more involved in when I took an interest in presuppositionalism. Although I was engaging a lot of atheists at university campuses when I would go and so forth, but I had other focuses and so forth, and just really would have loved to have heard how somebody like Bonson would have approached that. But I know he made some comments here and there. But
well, he has entire lectures on it.
Yeah, but I mean, they're not,
they're not in depth.
Part of the issue is that it wasn't Bonson's special focus. So there's a lot of stuff that I think if he knew more about Islam, I'm thinking, wow, how much better would his comments have been?
But actually, Anthony, interesting, and I think I 100% agree with you, but the first time I ever heard of the Islamic dilemma was from Bonson. It was from him.
Debate with at Orange
wasn't
Coast
a debate.
College.
It wasn't a debate. Okay. It was a lecture where he was going through the religions and showing how to apply presupposition. So, well, you're right. It wasn't like in depth, but he was going like through a brief survey of each point. And the first time I ever heard, before all this stuff became popular on YouTube, I listened to old lecture. Dr. Bonson talked about the Islamic dilemma, which I thought was pretty cool. And it's actually a form. Yeah, I think you would agree, right? The Islamic dilemma is a form of an internal critique, which is right up the presuppositionalists.
Right. And that's about what I'm going to say here. So I've heard for decades from Muslims that God can't enter into his creation. So the incarnation is precluded. There are other forms of this kind of objection. Sometimes they'll just say something like it's beneath his dignity to do this. But in this case, it's a much stronger claim. And it's arguing that the incarnation is impossible in advance, a priori. So God can't enter into his creation and interact directly with his creatures. And so my question with respect to the Quran then is, how can the Quran be what it claims to be? How can it be a revelation from this God? And a Muslim who's got his wits about him, he's going to say, oh, that's very easy. In fact, anybody interacting with Muslims probably thinks they've got a quick and ready answer to this. How does Muhammad have access to the Quran to convey it to others if Allah can't enter into his creation? Well, it was brought to him by the angel Gabriel. But notice the problem is supposed to be that Allah can't enter into his creation and directly converse with his creatures. Gabriel, on Muslim assumptions, is just as much a creature as Muhammad. There might be a bit of a gap between Muhammad and angels, but the gap between Muhammad and the angels on the one side and Allah on the other is still the fundamental gap that supposedly can't be traversed to get the word to Muhammad. And so my observation here is just that if the Quran is what it claims to be, then it can't be what it claims to be. It can't be a revelation from this God. Now, Dr. Bonson does say something along these lines. He talks about the Islamic doctrine of tanza, which is a view of transcendence, the utter remoteness. Now, one thing I would say is when it comes to something like this, and this is why in part I say it would be nice if Dr. Bonson had spent a lot more time than he apparently already, he spent time obviously on Islam, but there are different versions of Islam, different sects of Islam. And so what might be relevant as an argument against one Muslim may not be against another. Or what you might have to do is you might have to say, this is the position of the Quran. You might have to demonstrate that so that it then becomes a decisive argument against Islam in toto. But at least those forms of Islam that say Allah can't directly interact with his creatures, they're, in order to argue against the incarnation, they're also pulling the rug out from under their own position when it comes to the Quran. So that would be one thing. There are other things. I find all sorts of things inconsistent all across the Quran that Allah's doing that just don't make any sense if he's a Unitarian God. You hear people talking about love and other things, but I just think the whole kit and caboodle, it's like this being is not acting like the kind of being you'd think about this. One thing that you meet within the Quran that's surprising even to Muslims is Allah allegedly speaking in the plural, constantly saying we, us, our, in fact, way more than you find in the Bible. It's all over the Quran.
Sure.
Now, my final assessment of this, looking over all the material, and I have a lengthy treatment of this on the Answering Islam website, over 5 articles. It's 5 parts because I'm looking at the phenomena in the Quran and the different ways Muslims have tried to explain it and showing why they don't work and so forth. But my final assessment is that Muhammad overheard recitations of the scriptures from Jews and Christians and just sort of assumed this is how God speaks, because he does speak that way in the Bible. Let us make man in our image according to our likeness, Genesis 1:26. Same thing in 3:22, 11:7, Isaiah 6:8. So it is in the Bible. And I think Muhammad picks this up unwittingly and doesn't really know what the explanation of it is. He just thinks that's, maybe this is how, this is what God sounds like when he talks or something.
Yeah.
And part of the evidence for that, really quickly, just so people don't think I'm making this up, if you look at the Sirah literature, which is the biographical material on Muhammad, and other sources that reflect on this event that I'm going to mention, they talk about an occasion in the last year of Muhammad's life. The Quran is revealed over 23 years. The last year of his life, a delegation of Christians come up from southern Arabia, from the area, down south of Muhammad. They're Najrani Christians. They come up to Muhammad and they start asking him questions because his Dawagandists, the people that he was sending out, had come down with recitations of the Quran, calling them to Islam. So they heard some of these recitations. And they come to Muhammad and say, if he's only one, why does he say we? Why does he say we created, we decreed, we sent down? And now the standard answer of Muslims today is to say it's a plural of majesty, and it's just taken as a given. But Muhammad doesn't say that. In fact, Muhammad just clams up and doesn't say anything. Now, they asked other questions too, and he's just silent with respect to all of them. But the next day, he comes back allegedly having received a revelation from Allah, which is supposedly what we find in the first 80 verses of Surah 3. The problem is when you look at Surah 3, the first 80 verses for an answer to this, the only thing you get there that even seems potentially relevant is the statement in 3:7 that there are some things in the Quran that only Allah understands, kind of thing. Now, understand all prior statements in the Quran are that it's an absolutely clear book. There's no ambiguities in it. It's absolutely clear, exhaustively detailed. Now Muhammad suddenly does an about face and says, only Allah knows what these things mean. Okay, so I think the Christians know to draw and catch Muhammad short. But think about this for a moment. The common claim of Muslims today is that this is a plural of majesty. So Allah speaks in the plural as a way of indicating his majestic nature. Now think about it. If Allah is ultimately one and he is majestic, why is it that plural terms are those that bespeak majesty? The idea here is that it's indicative of a kind of fullness.
Mm,
It's like a peacock spreading out its feathers, and showing off or something. Why does Allah have to puff up his chest? He has to speak in the plural as a way of eliciting from people this sense of his majesty. If he's ultimately one, wouldn't terms indicating unicity and oneness and so forth themselves indicate majesty? So I just think the whole idea just looks to me like you're giving away the store. You're
yeah,
saying,
that's
no,
a good point. So if Allah is the greatest and he's one, wouldn't singular terminology be the standard of what's great and magnifying? But
yeah,
in order to expand on his majesty, he has to speak in the plural, which makes actually more sense if God was triune. It's like,
yeah,
holy,
exactly.
holy, holy.
Uh,
Like that's interesting. Yeah, I never thought about that. That's actually
yeah,
good.
and so, but the other thing I would say just quickly is just the very fact that he's a speaking being.
Mm,
Speech is something that involves communication. If a person grows up on an island all by himself, no social context and so forth, he won't speak. Even a human being that's capable of speech just won't develop a language. It just won't happen. And so it's passing strange that this God, like the God of the Bible, is portrayed as speaking. He's that kind of a being. Why? What is it about Allah that makes this a reality? All this makes sense within a Christian context. I don't see it making sense in the Islamic Unitarian context or
yeah,
any version of Unitarianism for that matter.
sure. Yeah. As a super chat here. Thank you so much. Former Jehovah's Witness came to faith through R.C. Sproul. You two are helping me see the value of presuppositional apologetics. God bless you. Would love to meet you one day. Well, would love to meet you. That's quite an encouragement. Praise God. Let's see here. Got a couple here. There's another one unfound. Scott, thank you so much. If a fallibilist tells me he's certain Christianity is false, is he undermining his own epistemology? Yes, I don't think a fallibilist would if he's going to be consistent. If he identifies as a fallibilist, then he kind of knows a little bit about epistemology because you don't randomly find people in the street say, "Well, I'm a fallibilist," right? So if someone's a consistent fallibilist and you can't be certain of anything, I don't think he would say that he's certain Christianity's false. But then it's weird when fallibilists say, "Well, we're all in the same boat." Wait, is that a fallible assertion, or are we to believe that we are all in fact in a fallibilist in the fallibilist boat? So yeah, that would be undermining his epistemology. But I'm not sure of many fallibilists who would actually say that what you're just expressing there. So I hope that helps. Let's see here. As a question, do you agree with Justin Martyr that certain aspects of philosophy was the precursor to Christianity? That's a very ambiguous question. The precursor to Christianity is God's prophetic word throughout the Old Testament that sets the context and meaning for the incarnation and the ministry of Jesus and the crucifixion, atonement, the resurrection, the ascension, and all the rest. I wouldn't, it depends what you mean by precursor. I think that there's a Christian philosophy is very unique. It has been influenced in certain regards, but I think with respect to certain secular and Greek influences, in as much as they cater to categories of neutrality and autonomy or things that challenge the sovereignty and aseity of God, I think those influences would not be good. So it really depends what you mean. It's a very ambiguous question. You have any thoughts on that, Anthony?
Yeah. So one thing is normally what people bring up with respect to Justin Martyr and the early Greek apologists is they believed that the philosophers had certain insights
Mm-hmm.
that Christians hold to, but that's because they got it from the Logos,
Mm.
who is active in the world
Who
prior
enlightens
to
every
the
man.
incarnation.
He enlightens
But
every man.
yeah,
Jesus enlightens every man. Is a
but
little bit.
then also there was this strain of thought where they would say things like Plato read Moses and stuff like that. But one of the things they often did was they would use philosophers like Plato to rebut pagans who had multiple gods and other things. And so they would argue that Plato rejected this system and so forth. So there's a lot going on there, right? And a lot of this would be viewed differently depending on what specifically we're looking at. But as I recall, it's been a long time. In a festschrift for Van Til, the Foundations of Christian Scholarship, Dr. Bahnsen had an article in there called Socrates or Christ. And I believe he touches on this sort of thing in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
People can pick that up. Socrates or Christ is an excellent book. I think you can pick it up for just a couple of bucks on Amazon, like for a Kindle. Digital. And I like what Dr. Bahnsen does is he shows the classical apologetics is built upon the framework that can be traced back to like the intellectual framework that Socrates was using, so that it's more in line with Greek thinking than biblical thinking, which is it's a really good I highly recommend folks check that out. All right, let's see here. This by the way, there's a link. So if you want to join us and ask your question, you can join us here up here on the stage. Feel free to post your questions. That's fine. But if you want to join us, you're more than welcome to. All right. But if no one joins, we'll just continue walking through this. I think people are nervous to be on the camera, right? It's all right. All right. So this is Johnny Q8V7Y. Thank you for your question. To both, at the foundational level, every worldview arbitrary? And please explain the one and the many problem and how it destroys worldviews like Islam. And please pray for my unbelieving family. Love you guys. All right. At the foundation of every worldview, you're going to have an ultimate starting point that you can't justify by appealing to something more fundamental. And I would argue that non-Christian worldviews have at their foundation arbitrariness ultimately and inconsistency. How you expose that is going to be through the apologetic interaction. So, for example, you talk to some atheists and you talk about, say, the foundations for logic or uniformity, and many of them will assert, well, those are just brute facts. And then, of course, once you hit brute fact, then you get into the level of arbitrariness, because if you could assert, it's just that way, then that kind of undermines, debate, because the other side could say, well, I'm going to assert my brute fact, and you can't really move the needle anywhere. So I would say yes. Not for the Christian worldview. I think we have a justification, but teasing that out is going to take a little work. Anthony, are you still there? It looked like you froze up a little bit.
Oh, I'm still here.
Oh, okay. Now, please explain the one and the many problem and how it destroys worldviews like Islam. Would you like to take that one, Anthony?
Well, you can. How about you do just explain what the one and many problem is, and then I'll.
He's like, and then I'll come and destroy Islam.
And I'll show something of its application to Islam. I think you do a better job explaining the issue itself.
Sure. So the problem of the one and the many is a philosophical problem that goes back to like the time of the pre-Socratics. So if those who don't know who the pre-Socratics are, those are the philosophers that predated Socrates. And so Socrates obviously is such a pivotal person in Western Greek philosophical thought. He's kind of like the Jesus figure. You know how we measure time by like BC, right? And then AD. Well, Socrates is so pivotal that there's a whole category called the pre-Socratics, because they're measured by when Socrates was on the scene. So the pre-Socratics tried to answer kind of the fundamental questions of metaphysics. What is the fundamental nature of reality? And when they reflected upon this question, they had difficulty bringing together the reality that while we experience many particular things, there seems to be also an overarching unity to it all. So they tried to kind of understand that what's the best way to understand this? What grounds this unity and plurality? And what you found in Greek philosophical thought is that the way they would answer that question is they would appeal to an ultimate one. Okay. So all of the many is actually the many is illusion, and everything is fundamentally one thing. Okay. For example, Thales said all is water. Other philosophers said all is fire, all is air. And then you go to the other side and somebody's like, no, ultimate reality is ultimately many particular things. But then they couldn't make sense out of like unifying principles like, logic and things like this. So the question is, how do we make sense out of plurality? There are many things, but there seems to be these overarching unities that bring it together. How do we bring that? How do we figure that out? And so philosophers have not been able to answer that question. Some people think they can answer it through or the reflection of something in some ideas in Aristotle. I don't think it works. But what the Christian says is we could account for unity and plurality because the unity and plurality we observe in the world through our experience is grounded ultimately in the unity and plurality of God, who is metaphysically ultimate. Because God being one in essence and three in persons, it makes sense that creation would reflect that unity and plurality, which is intrinsic to God. So that's what the problem is. Now, someone says, but why is this important to apologetics? Well, the issue of the one and the many actually has, it's related to how we make reality intelligible. If I have a worldview that's going to account for intelligible experience, I'm going to have a worldview that can bring together the many particular things that we see and those overarching unifying principles. And so if you have a worldview that's Unitarian, then the question becomes, how does a Unitarian God ground unity and plurality in the world? And to that, I invite Anthony Rogers, because one form of Unitarianism is a religion that holds to the doctrine of Tawhid, which deals with the fundamental unity and oneness of Allah in the Muslim religion. And of course, Anthony, I think, will do a great job explaining that. However, before he does that, if you're interested in a longer discussion on this, Anthony came on the show a few years ago where we addressed that specific issue. So if you type in on Revealed Apologetics precept applied to Islam, you'll see our much longer, I think it's 2-hour discussion on that very question. But go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, go watch that, because I may well have forgotten what I said there. And I'm just going to say whatever I said, it must have been. No. So first, really quickly, I just point out, if you get Rushdoony's book, The One and the Many, mostly it discusses this issue in relation to political stuff. But towards the beginning, he has some comments regarding Unitarianism and specifically Islam. I also think John Frame has some good stuff in his book, Apologetics to the Glory of God, which interacts with if you have a Unitarian God on the one hand, or if you have many gods on the other hand, the problems that result. But one book I don't know that's mentioned a lot these days, but I benefited from greatly, is a book by Ralph Allen Smith. It's called Trinity and Worldview. And in it, he discusses issues here. If you have a Unitarian God or a plurality of gods. And basically it's the one and the many issue, right? At the ultimate level. And one of the things that he did that was very helpful to me, and maybe this will be helpful to others in thinking through this, he said, imagine a dictionary. If you have a dictionary, and let's just say it's a monist dictionary, so it's just got one word in it. Well, what does it mean? Well, you can't tell what it means because there's just one word in it, right? How do we define words? We use other words, right?
That's right.
But that presupposes some kind of relationship between that word and all these other words, these many words that are used to define it. But now imagine if you're a pluralist or an atomist, or somebody who takes a view of things that it's all ultimately discontinuous or separate. In that case, you'd have a bunch of words that are unrelated to each other. So you couldn't use one word to define another. You just have a list of words with no relationship between them. So either way you go, you end up with meaningless words, right? One word with no definition and other words with no relationship to each other. And so that's kind of an idea of what the one and many problem is. And once you think through the ultimate foundation of some worldview like Islam and its its view of God, and you find out that its God is like that. Calvin said in his Institutes at one point, he said, unless we grasp these three persons, only the bare and empty name of God flits about in our brains to the exclusion of the true God. He's basically saying that such a God is a blank. Whenever you have somebody trying to give color to this thing, Allah, right? Whenever they're trying to get past just this blank, they're importing stuff that doesn't belong to it in the strict sense, right? I was talking about speech before. Such a being, speech isn't part of its being, right? Communication is foreign to it. It's not related to anything. There's no differentiation. So the idea that Allah is the ultimate explanation for things is extremely problematic. Now, I noticed a long time ago, I was reading a particular commentary on the Quran. Well, in this case, it's Yusuf Ali. He has a translation, a famous translation with footnotes in it, and they're so devastating to Islam that eventually Muslims stopped publishing it, or they seriously reworked his footnotes. But he would make all these crazy admissions that Christians use to great effect. But throughout the Quran, it constantly mentions the unity of things. It mentions how the world is orderly, how things work together, and so forth. And in the footnotes, the commentator Yusuf Ali keeps pointing to these things as proof for the unity of Allah. Right. So in one place in the Quran, it talks about how the Qibla, which is the prayer direction, is the central point of focus for all Muslims. So it establishes unity among the Ummah. They're all praying in one direction. And he says this points to the unity of Allah. And other places he talks about, design and how everything, though varied, fits into the overall direction of things. But the thing I kept thinking about as I'm reading all this, well, if the unity in the world points to the unity of the Creator, what does the diversity point to? Right? I mean, so again, this is his line of thought, right? The unity in the world points to the unity of Allah, but the diversity doesn't. So who accounts for the diversity? What is it pointing to? Nowhere. I mean, and if not to something, then why not, right? Why does the unity then point to something, right? This is where arbitrariness will enter in,
there
right?
we go.
So there's just huge problems here, and it doesn't end, right? This to me has been sort of like I mentioned I've been doing this for 30 years among, towards Muslims, and it's like, each month potentially brings with it a new realization of a problem.
Yes.
Right.
And people, and a lot of skeptics who hear us say like, oh, the problem, the one and the many, and they think that it's just kind of like a word game. Well, that's not really a problem, or Christians just invented that so that they can have the Trinity swoop in and pretend that it's answering this important question. It's like you have no idea. The unity and plurality is a fundamental issue. And people say, well, philosophers don't talk about it that much. Yeah, because they can't answer it. So it hasn't, and especially when you deal with a lot of philosophers today who are more analytic. Okay, they're not asking the big worldview questions. Analytic philosophy is more narrow than, say, like the older kind of continental philosophy and like the ancient philosophy, where you were trying to talk big picture. The big picture questions, many people don't believe you could answer them. So that's why analytic philosophy has taken that more narrow approach. But the problems of philosophy don't go away. And I think they have huge implications. Just you used Islam as the example, but just even like forms of like atomistic atheism, where someone might say reality is just fundamentally many individual material parts. Well, then you have no unifying logical principles drawing them together. As Van Til said, it's like having beads with no string to tie them together. You have no unity, which is what I was talking to that nice gentleman who came at the beginning on atheism. You have no unity to your worldview. You have no way to ground and provide a justification for these kind of overarching unifying principles. So the question of the one and the many has implications for epistemology, metaphysics. It's not simply like a problem that we invented or we make it bigger than it is a philosophical issue that I think it needs to be addressed. So, and I thought you did a great job there applying it to Islam.
One thing real quick, I remember years ago, and this was back in the 90s, so I can't remember exactly which dictionary this was. It was a dictionary of philosophy, and in it, they have a section on the one and the many, and it's Anthony Flew, who wrote it, and he points out its early beginnings. In fact, as I recall, he mentions that it's sort of the mother problem that gave birth to philosophy. But in the article, the thing that really sticks in my mind is he mentions that it's just not treated today because it was basically judged to be insoluble, and
That's
so
right.
people gave up. Right.
That's right. And what you just quoted Anthony Flew, who wasn't a Christian. So it's not like we're not making this up. It is an actual problem, and you're right. People don't address it because people don't find it solvable. But because if secular non-Christian philosophies have a problem with it, that doesn't mean we have to agree that it's a problem, because our worldview does have the foundation for it. Right? Someone says, "Oh, this is what presuppositionalists do. They pick all of the difficult, hard questions of philosophy, and they say, haha, you guys can't answer it." And then we hide behind. No, the Christian worldview can provide an answer for those things. It's a problem historically because of people holding to worldviews that can't actually answer those questions. The Christian worldview can. So yeah, so it's a good point. I'm glad you quoted Anthony Flew there, just to highlight that we're not just making this up. So, hey, if you guys are enjoying this conversation, please hit the like button and check Anthony Rogers' channel as well. He's got long form. He does a lot of long form teaching, and I think I love listening to those on the long road trips and all the rest. Here's a nice super chat. Thank you so much. Hi, Choroyera, I think, if that's Spanish, the L's is sounding like a Y. After thousands of hours of apologetics, Anthony Rogers is the best I've seen. Sharp, quick, incredible recall. Thanks for the defense of the Protestant faith. And he has a really nice Protestant-looking beard as well. So I just added that.
You know, it's funny. So thank you, High Trawler. I don't think that highly of myself. I do thank the Lord to be used. But you mentioned my Protestant beard. I have a lot of people who think,
I mentioned it.
Well, no, I have. There are people, though, they'll say, "Are you doing that because you're Reformed or something like that?" And I'm thinking, I know there are some people that do that. You know, there's people that are trying to imitate that, and then there are fads in certain circles.
Sure.
But this actually, there's a couple of things. But one is that I found that it's actually surprisingly useful when I engage Muslims. I watched Muslims years ago settle disputes with each other. This is among Muslims based on who has the longer beard. Now, I'm not suggesting this is a sound logical principle or anything. I'm only saying, if I'm going to talk to a Muslim and they're just going to discount me because I don't have longer beard than them, I'm just going to, so whenever I'm going to do debates with Muslims, and I've already had some this year, and I have some more coming up. So I keep the beard, but then I get tired of it and shave it off. So you never know when the beard might go, but it's actually I'll call it a Pauline beard because it's inspired by becoming all things to all men, which isn't to say you have to do this
Sure.
by any stretch.
Sure. That's awesome. All right, let's see here. Alessandro Andreoli. That's a fun name. Am I saying that right? Alessandro Andreoli. Andreoli sounds Italian. All right. If I sincerely believe that Christianity is true and that it is not just a hypothesis, why doesn't my worldview work anyway? So if someone's listening to this and they're saying, Eli, what the heck is Christianity? Christianity is part of an old objection to the transcendental argument. Came out back in the 90s. Christianity is a hypothetical worldview that puts itself forth as being able to hypothetically provide a basis for the necessary preconditions of intelligibility, because it's like Christianity in every way, but with like minor differences. So you have kind of a multi-personal God. Maybe it's a quadrinity instead of a trinity, or a bininity or something like that. The problem with this question is that, number one, we know for a fact this person doesn't hold Christianity to be true. So when he talks about hypotheticals, he's talking about, well, it's possible I could hold to this hypothetical. What will you do then? Well, the problem with this question is that it actually assumes categories of neutrality, because he can talk about possibility in the abstract. From a Christian perspective, Christianity is literally a hypothetically made up, someone's like, how do you know Christianity is not true? Because it is actually a thought experiment that someone purposely made up. So we know it's not an actual worldview. That's number one. Number two, Christianity is never clearly defined. I don't know what this person means by Christianity. If Christianity is the same as Christianity in every way except some minor way, what way? I mean, remember, part of the Christian paradigm is we have public revelation that can be examined. Where's the Christian Bible? Where's the Christian systematic theology? Where's the Christian source of authority so that we could examine its claims? The Bible has that. So so they say, oh, okay, well, maybe there's a scripture. It's like, okay. And then you start ad hocly adding to the picture, get a Christianity that's real. And then we can have it challenge Christianity and see why it doesn't work. But Christianity, when someone asks this question, the question is intentionally or unintentionally vague, and then yokes the Christian into trying to interact with it. Christianity is undefined. I don't know what you mean by that. So when you say Christianity is true, that's just a word. I don't know which items you think are similar to Christianity with the minor differences and all the rest. So I think it's an underdeveloped question, and it wouldn't be wise to even try to engage it because it's undefined. It's like debating someone who doesn't define their view, so there's nothing to shoot at. How would I critique Christianity if I don't even know what it is? Right? It's like Christianity in every way, like in every way except what? There, you can go in many different directions. So if it's fleshed out more, then maybe we could interact with it a little more. But there you go. Do you have any thoughts there, Anthony?
No, I could just throw in, and I imagine there's been more stuff done since this time, but in Dr. Bahnsen's Festschrift, the standard bearer, Michael Butler wrote a whole article in it where he's dealing with the Christianity objection. But I imagine there's been a lot more since that. That was way back.
Right. What I appreciate about this question, though, is that it looks like this person has probably listened to my response. So when someone says, how do you know Christianity is true? How do you know Christianity can't provide the necessary preconditions of intelligibility? And my response to that is, and I think this person worded the question in such a way that I think is good because it's countering my response. So when someone says, well, how do you know Christianity is not the right worldview? I always ask this question of the person positing the question. Do you hold to Christianity? If you're arguing that Christianity can provide the necessary preconditions of intelligibility, then you're actually implicitly asserting that the worldview you currently hold doesn't, because we're dealing with necessary preconditions, right? So, and it assumes neutral categories. So it assumes that you can take a hypothetical Christianity and then float in the middle and evaluate which one you're assuming neutral ground. This one is saying, and I like it how the Alessandro framed the question, if I sincerely believe Christianity is true, right? But then he's dealing with a hypothetical that's not true because he doesn't. You see what I'm saying? So then it becomes kind of too ambiguous to interact with. But all right, we've got someone joining us. Let's get you on here. Okay, so I didn't say this at the beginning, but if you are going to come on, I would like to see you if that's possible. I think when we do stuff like this, we're talking to human beings. So I'd like to see your face if that's possible.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
I could hear you. Yeah. If you could turn your camera on, that would be great.
Just a second, then I'll just put on some clothes.
I'm so sorry.
Just a second. Yeah.
No worries. Take your time. I'm like, please don't turn your camera on yet. That's awesome.
I wasn't expecting you to bring me on. That's why.
Oh, why not? Oh, I put the link there for a reason. I'm happy you're here. Let's see here.
Just take a second.
While he's getting dressed, let's see if we could take a couple. Let's see. Someone had a Hebrews. So while he's getting dressed, someone has a question for you. I think it was for you. I don't know if it was you or me, but it's from Hebrews chapter 9, verse 23. It says, thus it was necessary for the copies of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. The person is asking, why is sacrifices in the plural there? What is it referring to? Do you have any thoughts on that, Anthony?
Yeah. So commentators here, by and large, point out this is an anomaly, which just on the basis of sound hermeneutical principles, you don't try and make some doctrine out of it. So that's the first thing. That doesn't mean we stop there and don't seek out what's going on, but it's to put on the brakes and commend caution and so forth. But the second thing that's usually observed is it's there to sort of balance out the sentence. It's because it says in the context it's talking about the things that were prescribed in the law, and it says, therefore it was necessary for the copies of the things in the heavens to be cleansed with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. So what most commentators say here is it's just balancing the sentence, but as it goes on to explain, it doesn't mean that there's more than one sacrifice, because as you read in the following verses, it says, for Christ did not enter a holy place. Notice the for Christ did not enter a holy place made with hands, a mere copy of the true one, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Nor was it that he would offer himself often as the high, so not many sacrifices, literally, nor was it that he would offer himself often as the high priest enters the holy place year by year with blood that is not his own. Otherwise, he would have needed to suffer often since the foundation of the world. But now once, at the consummation of the ages, he has been manifested to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. So the author of Hebrews makes it clear that it is the one and of course, by the way, it should be mentioned that that's the whole point. The sacrifice of Christ is the fulfillment of all of that, right? It all meets in Christ as its fulfillment.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And thanks for the question. All right. He's dressed.
I'm dressed.
All right, man. What's your name and what's your question?
Yeah, my name is Tariq,
Nice to meet you,
and
Tariq.
nice to meet you as well. I'm already familiar with you, but
Okay.
So the question is, I just wanted to know first of all if Anthony is aware of David Mitchell. He's an Old Testament scholar.
Yeah, I think I have almost all of his books. His book on the Psalter, his book on Messiah ben Joseph. He has another book on the Psalms of Ascent, and then I forget the title, but it's something along the lines of Incarnate Word. And I love his stuff. So he's got really good stuff on the Psalms that I especially love because I love the Psalter. But also his book, The Incarnate Word, has one of the best treatments I've seen of the genealogies of Jesus in Matthew and Luke. So yeah, I'm familiar with him.
Yeah, because I'm asking because I was reading his book on Messiah ben Joseph, and I thought it was really detailed. But I recently found out he goes to my church, so
He goes to your
I
church.
wasn't even familiar. Yeah, I wasn't even familiar with this fact. And then I was reading his book, and then an elder at my church had told me that an Old Testament scholar, was having Bible studies on the Old Testament, and he told me this name, and I was reading this book, and then I told my sister, "Wait, does this name sound familiar to you?" And she said, "Yeah, he goes to our church, and his daughter is so and so," and and I was like, "What? So this scholar goes to my church? I didn't even know. I'm reading his
That's
book.
pretty
I'm not even
cool.
aware."
I wonder if he's teaching, if he's sitting there and he's got all that knowledge, he should be teaching some of the classes.
How do you preach at a church like that? Maybe
Uh,
like, some
well-
scholars say, right?
Well, when I was in
Yeah.
seminary, my goodness, it was pretty intimidating. So I live in an area that has just a lot of good Reformed churches and a couple of seminaries. So the seminary I went to, there's another seminary here, and there's a Christian university here and so forth. So at the church I interned at and had to preach at, on any given Sunday, you could have in the congregation a Hebrew scholar, Greek scholar, Old Testament, just you name it, systematic theology. They're all sitting out there, and you're thinking, I've got a lot of different ways I could potentially blow it over here. So you learn, to avoid certain things. Like, in other words, if I'm preaching a sermon, and I might avoid making some comment on the Hebrew. I'm talking about when I was first interning. You just avoid making some comment on the Hebrew or on the Greek or something. But yeah, that's pretty cool that you're there with Dr. Mitchell. Have you been able to meet him yet?
Yeah, a little bit. But I wanted to finish the book before I actually, because I was I'm
Before I
familiar with
actually
it.
confront him and talk to him, I want to finish so I
Before
can
I
say I
tell
read your
him,
book.
before I set him straight, I want to read his book. And I was reading I was familiar with the book on the Psalms, and but not the Messiah ben Joseph. I'm really, but I don't know how to put it all together, and I don't know how much the New Testament actually appeals to this notion of Messiah ben Joseph. I think it does. It does, and it gives a couple of examples from the book of John, where I think it's most prevalent that John is appealing to this Messiah ben Joseph figure. So I don't know what you think about that, the New Testament perspective
Well,
on
yeah,
this.
it's not as overt in the sense that a Davidic Messiah is, but there's obviously, I mean, I remember way back, I had a pastor that would often say, you can't take anything as a type that isn't explicitly identified as such in the New Testament. Now, I understand what the goal is there. You want to slow people down from trying to make everything mean something or point to something else. But I think that just goes way too far, because how can you read the story of Joseph and not see it as one huge type of Jesus? He's despised and forsaken by his brothers, thrown into a pit.
Right.
He's down in Egypt, which is considered the land of the dead. Eventually, his bones are brought up from Egypt, but throughout the course of it, he's humiliated, but then exalted in the house of Potiphar. First in the prison, first in Potiphar's house, then in the prison, then to the right hand of Pharaoh. He dispenses life-giving bread. There's just a wealth of things that point to Jesus there. But when you get to the New Testament, there's, first of all, if you look at Mark 12, I would say there's allusions to Joseph there when it talks about, last of all, he sent his son. There's certain terminology that's used there that comes from the Joseph story. There's one of the things that I recall Dr. Mitchell pointing out is the two different terms that are used for an ox when it gives the blessing over Joseph. One would be a sacrificial animal. Another one would be a more victorious, a creature that wields great power. Anyway, so I think there's definitely a lot of stuff there. And, but I would say he's probably the best guy to go to try and help you put together any loose ends that you have. Is this just typological, or does it necessitate genealogical descent from Joseph? And what exactly, those are the sorts of questions I think.
Yeah, I think he does make an argument for the genealogical descent from Joseph, but I don't quite understand how he does that. But in terms of the New Testament, I think one of the passages that did stand out was the woman at the well in John 4, because the Samaritans were expecting Messiah, but they didn't believe in, the Davidic covenant. So the thing that he appealed to was probably Joseph. They met at Joseph's well, what she believed to be Joseph's well. And then they went into Samaria, and then they believed on Jesus. And he said that he was the one they were waiting for, but they weren't waiting for a Davidic Messiah, as far as I'm aware.
But there's a number of things that are interesting. I remember in one of my Old Testament classes, the professor was talking about how there's all kinds of stuff when you read the Torah that seem to, if you didn't know otherwise from the stuff said about Judah, it might look like the Messiah is supposed to come through Joseph. I mean, after all, think about it. If you look at the breakdown of Genesis, you have the first 11 chapters, which is the primeval history before the call of Abraham. Then Abraham is covered from 12 to 26. Isaac is subsumed in the Abraham cycle of Genesis. And then, from 27 up through 36, it focuses on Jacob. And then suddenly from 37 to chapter 50, the focus is on Joseph, with a small with one chapter intercalated in there about Judah. Right. So why is Joseph given all this space, and then Judah has just this little spot within the Joseph narrative? So, and then when you look at the blessing on Joseph, it's much longer than that given to others, and it seems to speak about a prominent figure coming through him. So, there's a lot to be said for that. And the issue is, how do you bring those things together? Right. Ancient Jews would just say, Messiah for this, Messiah for that. We'll make different messiahs out of them.
There we go. So, is that all the questions you had there?
Unless I can ask some more.
Sure. Let's do one more, because we have another gentleman. Yeah. I assume it's a gentleman. I can't see the camera, so
sure.
Who's waiting behind you?
Or she?
Oh, well, yeah, the camera's off, so
they're getting dressed.
They're getting dressed. Good. Yes. Ask if you want to ask one more, that's fine.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask in terms of Islamic apologetics, because I have a Muslim background. That's why you have to have the beard. So I'm from a Muslim background, and I've been following the Islamic apologetics. That's how I actually came into Christianity, but I've seen the Muslim apologists come and go, like you were discussing with David in the recent live stream. You had I don't know, was it in the 90s, Jamal Badawi, and then in the early 2000s you have other apologists, and and then you have Mohammed Ijab and Ali Dawa, and now you have a new strand of apologists, and one of the recent ones is the Orthodox Muslim, or Libiano they call him. And he actually reminds me a little bit of what I used to read from the responses to Jamal Badawi on the Answering Islam website. And because he's actually one of the apologists that appeals to like a lot of critical scholarships. He appeals to the Q gospel. He appeals to Jewish arguments against Christianity. He was even on Tovia Singer's live stream, uh, bashing Christians, you know. And so I wanted to know if you're familiar with his arguments and if you're planning on doing something, because he actually tries to go into the Hebrew and actually use the arguments that the counter apologists from Judaism and Bart Ehrman types try to use against Christianity. He also goes with the theory that Paul and the early Christian community were at odds in terms of meat sacrifice to idols and keeping the law, etc., etc. So.
Okay. Anthony, if you could answer that, I'm just going to take you off the screen just so we can get set up for the next, I wouldn't say caller, but I guess our next visitor, I suppose. But if maybe you could listen to the answer off screen. Thank you so much, man.
Sure.
It was a privilege meeting you, and I hope that was helpful to you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. God bless. Take care.
God bless.
All right. If you want to answer his question.
Yeah. So I would say, and I'll be quick here. So Libiano himself, I've seen, but not a lot of him, but I'm certainly familiar with the sorts of things he's pulling from. So you mentioned Ehrman and critical scholarship and the supposed opposition between Paul and the other apostles and Q, all those sorts of things. All that's old hat, right? So what's interesting, when I mentioned you have Islamic apologists and they sort of fade from the scene. Well, what also happens is arguments fade from the scene, but then they come back. For quite a while, Muslims seem to have dropped a lot of these things, but it seems maybe Libiano is one who's trying to resurrect some of them. I'll just comment on one of these and just show you part of the problem with it. So you mentioned Q. Think about this. You get all these people that are hard on the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and questioning authorship and all sorts of other things, but they all surprisingly accept Q. Now, I don't believe in Q. I'm not going to be bent out of shape over. There are Christian scholars who believe in Q, but think about this. We have no manuscript for anything called Q. There's absolutely no manuscript. We've got all kinds of manuscripts for the Gospels, but we're going to be skeptical
source
of all sorts, in all sorts of ways on the Gospels, right? But not Q. Now, we've got no mention of Q in any ancient source. Nobody mentions this thing. So there's no concrete evidence for it. Nobody mentions it. And then I find a lot of the arguments for it specious. Now, what really gets me is when people try to use this to build certain arguments. Right. It's always problematic. Like, you've seen people, how they string probabilities together. And then at the end of this, they say, and so it's certainly the case. Yeah, their conclusion is certain after this string of probabilities. Right. Well, that's what all these people do. They string together a bunch of probabilities, and then they want us to swallow this conclusion that supposedly follows from all that. Right. So what happens with this Q idea is you've got Q, then you've got Mark writing, and then you got Matthew coming along and mixing some of his own material together with Q and Mark. Then you got Luke doing the same thing with Mark and Q and adding some of his own material. And what's happening along the way is things are being embellished. So Matthew is upgrading Mark, and Luke ditto. And then John goes off the rails and upgrades all of them. So Jesus goes from being a simple man and maybe a prophet to then being something more than that. So what people like Ehrman would say is what you've got going on in some of the later Gospels is an apotheosis where Jesus is being adopted as a son of God. And so kind of being exalted to divinity. He's admitting that he's a God, right? But it's in this other way. And then John wants Jesus to be God from eternity rather than by this induction into divinity. But this is all built on this reconstructed order of composition and so forth, which I don't agree with. And so the bigger problem I have is what they try to do with it, where they're trying to build this evolutionary theory. But I think you could show that the whole evolutionary notion is just false by knowing what the Gospel of Mark teaches. If Mark teaches the deity of Christ, the whole evolutionary scheme goes out the window. And so more could be said, but there's one thing I would say in response to that sort of thing.
All right, thank you. Interesting stuff. All right, we have the sword of the Lord. That rhymes. That's cool. If you could turn on your camera, that'd be great. And then you could ask your question.
Oh, I don't even have a camera. I'm using my desktop.
Your desktop doesn't have a camera?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, may the Lord bless you with the resources to upgrade. What's your name?
Sword.
What was that?
Sword.
Your name is Sword?
Uh-huh.
That's like your actual name?
Uh-huh.
It's on your birth certificate?
Uh-huh.
So
okay, Sword.
Got a computer without a camera, and his parents didn't give him.
Is your last name of the Lord?
No.
It reminds me of Mr. T. Somebody asked him, "What's your middle name?" And he says, "Period." Right? Mr. Period T.
All right. Well, we'll let it slide. I do like to see who I'm talking to, but go ahead. You could ask your question. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a misunderstanding in the church about Jesus saying that a man can no longer have multiple wives.
Are you
But
married?
that was yes.
Do you have multiple wives?
Yes.
You do? Okay. All right. So you're arguing that
Do you live in Utah?
No.
You live on the border of Utah? That's where Warren Jeffs lived. Colorado?
No.
Do you know Warren Jeffs?
No.
Okay.
Well, if you ever go to prison, you'll see him there because he was arrested for his polygamy. Is that why you don't want to show your face on camera?
No.
Oh, because it is against the law, you know.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
To have multiple contracts, yeah, it is.
Okay. So what's your question?
Would it be against the law for Abraham to do that?
If you lived in America.
So America's law is better than God's law?
You asked if it would be against the law. If it's the law in America and Abraham lived in America, then it would be against the law.
Is it against God's law?
Yes.
How?
Jesus says it was not that way from the beginning. God made one man, one woman, joined them together, and that was it.
So God broke his own law when he said to King David, I gave you your wives and I would have given you more.
Who said he was breaking his law? Where else did David's wives come from?
Where else did they come from?
Yeah. You think there's another God out there? Are you also a polytheist to go along with polygamy?
Didn't God tell King David he gave him his wives and he would have given him more?
Didn't you just say that?
Uh-huh.
And didn't I just respond to that?
I don't really understand your answer.
I don't think you understand the Bible either. So now we're even.
Well, you said it's against the law of the Bible.
So wait a minute. You're saying, did God violate his own law? So let me ask you, what does the law of God say with respect to the kings and multiple wives?
You shouldn't multiply strange wives,
It
pagan
doesn't say
wives.
strange wives. It doesn't say that.
In the context, it does.
What's the context? What's the passage?
The passage of Deuteronomy 17 is avoiding
right.
pagan nations.
It doesn't say anything about only strange. Besides that, are you saying David only had Jewish wives?
Yeah, you could have converts.
Now you could have. Oh
no, you can have converts. That's fine.
Where does it say that?
Where does it say that?
Yeah, you're just arbitrarily
King
saying.
David's grandmother was a Moabite.
Right. And my dog's an Aussie Doodle. So here's what it says in Deuteronomy 17. It says, moreover, he shall not multiply for him horses for himself, nor shall he cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. Since the Lord has said to you, you shall never again return that way. He shall not multiply wives for himself, or else his heart will turn away, nor shall he greatly increase silver and gold for himself. So it doesn't qualify it by saying foreign wives, strange wives, or anything else. It simply says he shall not multiply wives for himself.
So he can only have one piece of silver, one piece of gold,
But
and one horse.
besides that, you miss the fact that according to Jesus, the practice with respect to wives was something.
Why did he say Egypt?
Was something that Jesus said was a concession to them because of their hardness of heart, but it wasn't that way from the beginning. So Jesus points to the original creation as the paradigm for marriage.
Can we go back to 17 though? Why did he say Egypt?
What do you mean? You're saying in verse 16. I was looking at 17. He says, you shall not cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses, because they're not to return back to Egypt.
Is that saying he can't have more than one horse, or is it saying you can't multiply horses from Egypt?
Well, first of all, it says that the king is, in verse 16, it says he shall not multiply horses for himself, nor shall he cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. So you have a simple statement, he is not to multiply horses for himself. And then you have the additional statement, the people are not to return to Egypt to multiply horses.
Yes, they had an abundance of gold, silver, and horses.
Right. Does that
That's what Egypt was. That's what Egypt was known for.
Only Egypt?
I mean, that's one of the things they were known for.
You're trying to make a statement that refers to Egypt gloss all the other statements that are made. That's just illicit. It says he shall not multiply horses for himself, nor shall he cause the people to return to Egypt. So the first statement isn't restricted to Egypt.
Okay, so again, do you think God is breaking his own law?
His law says don't multiply wives for yourself. And so you're the one that's saying people multiply wives for themselves. Besides that,
I'm saying according to the context of that entire chapter, he's talking about strange nations.
And when he confronted before you were emphasizing the one statement that makes reference to Egypt. So is it nations in general now, or just Egypt?
That's a pagan nation.
Yeah, but you're just playing fast and loose here. There's a general statement not to multiply wives for yourselves. Because you don't like the way that reads, you want to import into it the reference to Egypt, but now that's not working for you, so now you want to make it refer to nations in general.
But who multiplied King David's wives?
If that's what you want to do to justify your practice of polygamy, then all you're doing is being a law unto yourself.
Who multiplied King David's wives?
Jesus in Matthew 19 said that the subsequent practice of people after the time of Moses or under Moses was not the paradigm. It's not the norm. It was a concession to people because of their hardness of heart.
Okay, you and I agree that the Bible doesn't contradict itself, right?
And that you contradict it. Do we both agree on that?
No. Okay, now, in the same book of Deuteronomy, chapter 24, it tells you how to manage having more than one wife.
Right. It regulates the practice that Moses allowed for, given their hardness of heart. It doesn't refute Jesus, who said it was not that way from the beginning. Moses made certain allowances for people because of their hardness of heart.
Hardness of heart of divorce.
Do you believe in Jesus? Do you believe in Jesus?
Absolutely. But the verse.
Did Jesus say that the creation of
I
man and
believe,
woman, and they're being joined
yes,
together as husband and wife, was the paradigm for husband and wife relationship.
yes, but you're quoting something about the Pharisees coming to him asking if it's okay to put away a wife for any reason.
Right.
That had nothing to do with polygamy.
But the principle still applies. The way Jesus deals with what was allowed for under Moses is by pointing them to the original creation event. Remember,
Yes, in this,
after the fall, certain things came into, became realities. And that would include, for example, even, let's just say, warfare. So
I'd say polygamy came before the
without,
fall.
I don't mean to speak while you're interrupting, but when God created the world, there's no warfare, right? After the fall, warfare became a reality. But this is
Polygamy didn't come after
regulated.
the
Okay,
fall.
one
This
second.
is
So we gotta go one at a time, right? So Anthony, you finish your thought, and then Sword, you can finish your thought, so that we're not talking over each other. Okay.
Hmm.
yeah.
Thanks. I
So
appreciate it.
then after the fall, new realities are in play and these things are regulated. But when Jesus comes into the world, he's restoring things to the way they were intended to be. So when Jesus comes in Matthew 19 and he points out that there were some things that Moses allowed for because the people had hard hearts and the kind of hearts that were willing to play with the word of God to justify certain practices, such as making things specific that were general and things that are general specific, that sort of thing. He says there are certain concessions that were made to deal with this reality because the people had hard hearts. Remember, the whole problem under the law of Moses is that they had a fundamental problem that Moses' law didn't deal with. They had uncircumcised hearts and ears. In Deuteronomy 30, Moses said, in the future, God is going to rectify this problem. He's pointing to the new covenant. Well, who is it that brought in the new covenant? It's Jesus. When Jesus came, he pointed people back to the original situation when God made man and said, that's how it's supposed to be.
Mm.
Okay, so if God himself is saying that he is the husband of Israel and Judah, do you think God is describing himself as being something that he doesn't even like? In Jeremiah 3, God himself says he is the husband of Israel and Judah. And he says, I am married to them both. He
Israel
said,
and
I
Judah,
divorced
first of
one.
all, yeah, I'm sorry, we done or no?
He said, I divorced one. That's marriage.
So that was the conclusion of your thought?
Hmm.
Yeah. So Israel and Judah are ultimately one people, but obviously they split. And so it allows for speaking of a twofold subject. I don't think that has any warrant. I mean, it doesn't provide any warrant for saying you can take two wives. I mean, if your wife somehow, well, you have many wives, but if one of your wives somehow turned into two, yeah,
Okay,
it would allow
Jeremiah.
for you to speak in this very anomalous way, like you have, two wives, but ultimately the people of Israel and Judah are one people. He didn't marry two different people or
Okay,
enter into covenant with
Jeremiah.
two different people.
Right. Okay, Jeremiah 3, verse 8. And I saw, for when all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery, I put her away and given her a bill of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister, Judah, feared not and went and played the harlot also. He's describing them as two sisters.
What happens, of course, again, you're simply playing with the metaphors here. The fact is that Israel was one people. Because the 10 tribes departed from God, they're spoken of as a separate entity. But notice they're not literally, I mean, this is corporate language, right? But they're not literally two different persons, sisters. You don't even take that literally. These are multiple peoples that are being subsumed under these images. But it's created because there's a split in the nation. So it doesn't represent God entering into a marriage with two different women, one called Israel, the other called Judah. It was the people of Israel that God entered into a covenant relationship with. It was one nation, and then that nation split. So I think you're just trying to make that do more work than it can do for you.
Yeah,
But in any case,
Sword. If you could just make a last statement, and then we have someone else waiting. But thank you for your question. If you want to say one final thing, if you could just wrap it up quickly, okay?
Yeah. You guys are ignoring the fact that God himself blessed many polygamous marriages throughout scripture. He called Job perfect. Job had concubines. He told King David, I gave you your wives and would have given you more. He describes himself as having two wives himself, Israel and Judah. He blesses Abimelech after Abimelech turns Sarah to Abraham so that Abimelech could bear children to his wives and his concubines. He blesses Abraham's marriages between Sarah and Hagar. He calls King Josiah the best king, and King Josiah had two wives. Jesus describes heaven like a polygamous marriage in
Okay. All right.
Matthew
Can you
25.
land the plane so you're not just listing a bunch of scriptures? I mean, just your final thoughts. You got like 10 more seconds, okay?
Yeah, that's all. That's all I needed.
All right. Thank you so much for hopping on. Appreciate it. All righty. Okay. Well, that was interesting. It's interesting that you did answer his questions directly. Lionheart has a good point here. The Bible also regulates divorce, but it's still immoral. I was gonna ask, but I didn't want to prolong it too long. But does he believe that we should own slaves in the modern context? I mean, the Bible, I think, makes a good you can make a good argument against the kind of slavery that was practiced back in the day, but God made provision in a fallen world, right? That doesn't mean that it's God's ideal or that it's what God would want us to do or it's justified. So I think he's ignoring. I don't think he'd be consistent in that regard, unless he actually thinks that we should own slaves today. So very, very interesting.
yeah.
So, all right. Well, we have someone waiting. Let's see here. That was odd. Let's see. Oh, Brian left. I'm sorry, Brian. Okay. Well, there is a link there if you want to hop on. Otherwise, we'll take some of the other questions here. Let's see here. All right. Anchored Sage says, I'm curious to hear both of your perspectives on Eastern Orthodoxy, biggest differences, concerns, namely, can they consistently use precept as an apologetic method? Well, there's obviously a vast difference. I think I would have very similar problems with Eastern Orthodoxy in the same regard that I would have many problems with Roman Catholicism. There is a denial, I think, of the biblical gospel of justification by faith alone. I also, with respect to presuppositionalism, I do know that there are a lot of Eastern Orthodox people who are following along the lines of someone like a Jay Dyer. I do have a video, I think I have a video where I address this specifically. I do not believe that Eastern Orthodoxy can consistently use a presuppositional approach because the presuppositional approach, especially developed by Cornelius Van Til, was predicated upon a particular understanding of God from a Reformed perspective, which entails God as being the absolute, all-encompassing, all-sovereign God. So that would be inconsistent with, say, certain forms of libertarian freedom, and it would reduces to various levels of what we call correlativity, which is very problematic as well. If folks are interested in that, you can check out the work of Dr. Lane Tipton. Had him on the channel some years back as well. We had a really good discussion in that regard. And ultimately, if you hold, for example, to what is known as an ecclesiastical epistemology, namely that the church is the foundation of your epistemology, so that in order to have access to the worldview grounded in scripture, you need to get access via the infallible church. The interesting thing is that the fundamental epistemological principle on that view is something that's grounded in creation, the church, and not on God himself. Which I think is an issue there as well. For the Protestant, we believe that our fundamental epistemological principle is God's revelation, and our metaphysical principle is the triune God himself. So I think there are problems there as well. So that's just kind of a thumbnail. That's obviously a bigger picture, and there's a lot of theology to flesh out there. But those are my thoughts in thumbnail sketch. You have any thoughts there, Anthony?
Yeah. So in addition to what you mentioned with respect to the doctrine of God, they're adamantly opposed to the sovereignty of God. But in addition to that, as well as soteriological issues, they reject sola fide, and the other stuff you mentioned. I would also point out, and you weren't trying to be exhaustive, neither am I trying to be, but the whole issue of icons, there's no warrant for that in Scripture. The early history of the church is a landslide against it, but especially grievous is so first of all, the Bible abominates this. According to the Second Council of Nicaea, not the First Council, which affirmed the Trinity, it's not only acceptable to venerate icons, one must do so, or else be damned. So they're not only doing something that's contrary to Scripture, they're insisting upon it as a necessity. If you want to be saved, you have to do this. So, those are among the issues. But, another thing I would say is online, there's a lot of stuff that is being circulated, passed around as orthodoxy. But got to tell you, the more I read Orthodox writers, and this hasn't been my primary focus, but the more I think, wait a minute, I'm not so sure these guys are saying the same thing. So, for example, many of them put forth this idea that they have a distinctive view of the Trinity. They call it monarchical Trinitarianism, and they claim it just is the Eastern Orthodox view. But everywhere I turn in older Orthodox writers, that's just not what I'm seeing. And I've heard some of them, when they're articulating their particular view of God, that just sounds to me like polytheism in some cases. They seem to have no trouble speaking of the Son and the Spirit as, additional, as gods. So there's a lot of issues there, but some of them I think really are the Orthodox position. Some of them are questionably so. So a lot of issues.
All right. Thank you for that. All right. We have, well, let me get this up here, right, Jeff. We have a Jeff in the studio, but here's Jeff Downs, a mutual friend of ours.
Hey,
when are you all coming up to Mechanicsville? When you invite us. I'm waiting
and
for
when you get those steaks ready. Though some
Ooh.
people don't know, Jeff is a great cook.
Okay. There you go. All right. So I hope everything's well, Jeff. Now, we have another Jeff. Hey, how's it going, Jeff?
Hey, did I see you the other day?
I think your mic is muted. Let me see if it's me. Okay, there you go.
No, it's me. It was me. Sorry.
All right. How are you doing, Jeff?
Good.
Good.
Got a rabbit.
That's awesome. There you go. Do you have a question?
Yeah, about the Stroudian objection, which is like your favorite to talk about, Eli.
I don't know if it's my favorite, but yes, we've discussed it.
It's
before.
my favorite for me to watch you talk about. That's for sure.
Okay.
Anyway, so I kind of see that your answer. I'm trying to piece together how, how reality, if it's one way, it can only be accurately described in one way. Is that correct? Is that how you would word it?
Yeah, if reality is the way that it is, I don't think that you can have an accurate description of reality, but it's not actually reality. So if reality is one way, you're going to have one description that accurately corresponds to it. If the person describing it is in possession of a correct worldview.
Okay, good.
Because I don't think like, for example, like there are multiple worldview frameworks that can equally and accurately describe reality. I don't think that's possible.
Right. And I would agree. And I was just wondering, because I'm young and I'm just now getting into presuppositionalism, and I like to think ahead logically in arguments. Sure. What's like the best objection to your objection to the Stroudian objection? Really?
Okay, well,
because I've heard your response that you've just given, and I really like it. But just to make sure I'm equipped, I want to know if there's any other ways of it, like atheists or evidentialists maybe might question that answer.
Well, I mean, it depends who you're talking to. I think it's true that reality has to be a certain way, and that Christianity fits what is necessary to ground those necessary preconditions. I don't know how they would respond to my response. I think the problem with the Stroudian objection, when people use it to try to use it against like presuppositionalism, is that they're appealing to the work of Barry Stroud, but Barry Stroud's Stroudian objection doesn't touch Van Til and Greg Bahnsen and the presuppositional tradition, because he's talking about transcendental arguments just generically, like historically. And I think the fundamental difference between, say, a transcendental argumentation within the Reformed tradition and the presuppositional tradition is that it is not predicated upon a foundation of autonomy. So the Stroudian objection does in fact work when it is critiquing transcendental arguments that presuppose that man is autonomous, that we start with man, because in that case, you're stuck in your conceptual framework, and there's no way to bridge the gap between your conceptual framework and what is actually the case. But from within a Christian paradigm, within the presuppositional paradigm, we don't start with ourselves. We start with God as metaphysically ultimate. That's our metaphysical foundation, and his revelation, which is the epistemological link that gives us access to the nature of reality. So God creates in that essence, being in virtue of what he is revealed in scripture, provides that basis for what must be true in order for intelligible experience to be possible. So I don't know how people would explain that, because if you're not going to start from the Christian perspective, you're going to start from some neutral, autonomous perspective, in which case you're going to be stuck in the very issues that the Stroudian objection is meant to respond to. So a non-Christian transcendental approach is going to fall victim to the Stroudian objection. The Christian transcendental approach is not, because we're not starting from an autonomous perspective. So I would say that like the secular use of transcendental arguments is going to fall into what's called the egocentric predicament. There's no way to get outside of yourself. From the Christian, we don't start with ourselves. We start with God and his existence and revelation, which are preconditions that allow us to bridge that gap that other transcendental proponents from a secular perspective can't bridge.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's a really.
You froze up there. Okay. Well, yep. Go ahead. You're skipping in and out. So,
all right. Well,
what did you say? I'm sorry. Okay. So yeah, well, we'll remove you, not because I don't want to talk to you, but it's hard to understand. So I hope my answer helped a little bit. All right. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Oh, well, that's always unfortunate. All right. How about we take a few more questions and then we'll wrap things up? Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see here. We've got there we go. Explain to us, what is preterism, and what Bible passages can you point us to that led you to hold that view? Well, I hold to I know there's big hullabaloo about the terminology. I'm just using the terminology as I use it when I came to these views. So I'm a partial preterist, and I'm also a post-millennialist with respect to my millennial perspective. With respect to preterism, let's say, because it's a big topic, we'll narrow it down to say something like Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Mark 13, and then the book of Revelation and things like that. I think the time indicators are very helpful in coming to the conclusion that a preterist interpretation is very likely given those time indicators. I do not take what I take to be an extreme application of that and move, full bore, full preterism. I think there's problems with that. It's a huge topic. Obviously, we can't address it in one question. But one of the things that helped me adopt a partial preterist perspective were the time texts, especially in Revelation chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, where before you even get into all of the difficult symbolism and all the rest, let me just read it real quick. John says the following. He says, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants the things which must soon take place. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all that he saw. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written, for the time is near. So you have these time indicators. You even throughout the Old Testament, there's a sense of urgency that something very big was on the cusp. You have, for example, Hebrews chapter 1, where the author of Hebrews refers to the days in which he's living in as the last days. So I think that all those time indicators were a very helpful way of getting me to see the value of the preterist position. I do caution people of the hyper preterism. I think that is a heretical view. But for me personally, those time indicators is really what helped me kind of understand those scriptures in this way, in kind of a short thumbnail, especially Matthew 24:34, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place, all that kind of stuff. I think it's very plausible given those time indicators that the events that Jesus is describing are the events leading up to and including the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. All right. You have any thoughts there, Anthony?
Yeah. So you mentioned Revelation, how it begins. What's interesting is it uses more than one word to indicate the soon coming fulfillment of these things. There it uses two. There's a third term that's used in the Greek text, and these are sprinkled throughout the book. So the author, John, alerts you to this right out of the chute, keeps it before you as you move through the book. And then as he concludes the book, he does the same thing. He uses various terms indicating the nearness of these things. So, for example, verse 20, yes, I'm coming quickly. Amen, come Lord Jesus. But one thing that really stands out here is if you contrast the book of Daniel, where he's given these visions, at one point, Daniel's told, go your way, Daniel, seal up the vision and prophecy because it awaits the distant future. So Daniel's told to seal up the visions precisely because the time is not yet. It's not near. It's not going to be quickly. It's not soon. But John is told the opposite in the book of Revelation. Don't seal up the visions of this prophecy because the time is near. So that sort of thing is huge. And I would say just, one other text that really got me thinking along these lines is Matthew 16. In Matthew 16, Jesus is talking to the disciples about the fact that he's going to go up to Jerusalem and die. They need to pick up their cross and follow him. And then he mentions in verse 28, after saying that the Son is going to come in the glory of his Father with his angels and will then repay every man according to his deeds, which some people might take to be a reference to the end of the world. And here, let me point out really quickly, though, that you could have expressions that refer to the end of the world that can also refer to precursors to that event. So throughout the Old Testament, it uses the phrase the day of the Lord. Ultimately, it refers to a day that's still future for the prophets, but it also referred to days that preceded that more ultimate day. Whatever that is, if you want to take a full preterist, I'm not obviously not a full preterist, and I do think it's heretical, but I'm saying just with respect to this point, if you want to say that the day of the Lord that was still future for all the prophets has already come, the point I'm making here is that there are other things that you identify as the day of the Lord that precede whatever that is, right? So you can have the same expressions used for different things. So here, what I would say is in Matthew 16, Jesus uses an expression to refer to his coming in judgment upon Jerusalem, which could also be used to refer to his final world-ending coming when he talks about repaying every man according to his deeds. But here's the kicker. This is why I think this text is talking about AD 70. Verse 28 says, truly, I say to you, there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. It says there are some who are standing here. That means that the event has to be far enough in the future that most have died.
Right.
Because it's some. Some is a portion of the whole, and it's not most of it. So most will have to have died by the time this event happens. But it's not so far in the future that everyone has died. Some are still going to be alive.
All right.
So it has to be a distant enough event and a not so distant event as to account for these two things. And
AD 70 fits that perfectly.
Yeah.
It fits it perfectly, yeah.
And when you look at like just the beginning of Matthew 24, when he says, not one stone here will be left on top of another. I mean, that was literally fulfilled. What more could you ask for? The emperor wanted the gold of the temple, so they were told not to destroy it. But through various providential factors, they do set the temple on fire. The gold seeps between the cracks of the bricks. And so lest they go back to the emperor without the gold, they literally have to pry it apart brick by brick to get every bit of gold. So, and by the way, one other thing really quickly, one of the things I love to bring up in this connection, if you read Josephus, first of all, it just reads like he's recording, he's an eyewitness, he's recording what happened in these events. And it reads like a commentary on the Olivet Discourse and the book of Revelation, but there's a chapter in his book on the Jewish revolt in which he mentions the watchmen on the walls. So when the Romans surrounded Jerusalem, they had these, machines for war, machinery, the catapults and other things. And the catapults would hurl large stones weighing around 100 pounds, which, by the way, in the book of Revelation, it talks about this adulterous woman being stoned with 100-pound hailstones. So stones coming down from the sky that weigh about 100 pounds. But they had a white appearance, and as they whirled through the sky, they made this horrendous whistling noise, and they reflected the light of the sun. So you have this resplendent appearance and this whirling noise. And Josephus says that the watchmen on the walls began crying out when the first stone came whirling through the air. They said, "The sun is coming." S-O-N. The sun is coming. So something was ringing in their ears. I mean, not this, not the thing itself, but they would have heard the preaching of the apostles and others talking about the coming judgment on Jerusalem. And when they saw this happening, it's like they're putting two and two together, and they're interpreting this event as the sun's judgment. And that's Josephus. I mean, when I read it, I'm thinking there's got to be some explanation for this, and I've never found one. It's really interesting. The sun is coming.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. Yeah. All right, thank you for the question. We have one more guest. We'll do one more. We have Isaac here. Hey, Isaac, how's it going?
How you doing, brother Rogers and brother Eli? How are you guys?
We're doing well. It's nice to meet you.
Hi. I want to first thank you guys both for the influence that you guys have had on me in my walk with Christ. Brother Rogers, I discovered you around 2021 when I was about 15 years old and 20 now. In my discovering of how to defend the deity of Christ and Protestant theology. So I want to thank you for that. And Brother Eli, I discovered you a few months ago for presuppositional apologetics. So I just want to first thank you guys both for the things that you have done, of course, by the grace of God, for me. But my question is, it's particularly in the translation of Psalm 110, verse 3. So I know in the Septuagint, it renders it a little different from the Masoretic text. But when I was going into different versions like Aquila, Symmachus, Theodotion, I was seeing that the translation seemed to agree with the Masoretic text in verse 3. So I was just wondering, in both parts of the, whether the people volunteer willingly or, to him is the sovereign reign. And then in the other part where it says, to you is I think it's the dew of your youth or something like that, while the Septuagint.
Well, let me read it. I'll read it so the folks can know what you're talking about. And then Anthony, that sounds like a you question because I'm not familiar. But I'm going to read let me read verses 1 through 3 so people get the full idea. Psalm 110 verses 1 through 3 says, "The Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. The Lord sends forth from Zion your mighty scepter. Rule in the midst of your enemies. Your people will offer themselves freely on the day of your power in holy garments. From the womb of the morning, the dew of your youth will be yours."
Yeah. And so I was seeing, of course, that's from the Masoretic text, from the vowel pointings of the Masoretes. But when you read the Septuagint, it reads differently. It reads it as the verb rather than a noun, as I have begotten you in the last part of verse 3. And so when I was reading through some of the other versions, like Aquila, Symmachus, and Theodotion, I believe Jerome translates it this way, and I believe Sixtus in Origins, or Sextus or something in Origins Hexapla. So I was just wondering, how would you deal with the other translations that seem to deal with the Masoretic over the Septuagint?
Yeah. So first of all, for those that need a little bit more filled in, the issue is Psalm 110:3. So the Masoretic text refers to the Hebrew text as it was handed down to us or transmitted through medieval Jewish channels. So in the original Hebrew, it's written in all consonants, but after the time of Christ, it was deemed necessary to preserve the certain readings to add vowel pointings to disambiguate things in cases where it might be ambiguous. If you go over to Israel today and you read a newspaper, it's not going to have any vowels in it because they know their own language, and it's pretty easy to just read it. I mean, if you're a native Hebrew speaker, it'd be like us. If we take the vowels out of the words, most of us are going to have little difficulty reading what it says, right? We know it has to be there. Well, but the Masoretes from the 5th to the 10th centuries are adding vowel pointings, and those vowel pointings are not infallible. The consonantal text is, but the vowel pointings are not. And by and large, I would say they got it right. But there are times when there's a lot of room for questioning, and what's ultimately suspicious is how they point things when it comes to messianically pregnant texts. Often, when you see the Masoretic text diverge from, like, let's say if you've ever noticed the New Testament quoting passages from the Old Testament, and sometimes you're like, that's not how it reads back there. It's because our Old Testament is being translated from the Masoretic text, whereas the authors of the New Testament are very often not looking at a Masoretic. There is no such thing as a Masoretic text. It's just the Hebrew text without vowels, or a Greek translation, or something like that. So they're going in a messianic direction, whereas the later Masoretes are often not. Okay, so in Psalm 110:3, there's a particularly thorny issue there, because verse 1, it says, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. And so it already indicates the exalted nature of this figure. But then verse 3, read without the vowel pointings, most naturally would say he was begotten before the day star. So before the dawn of creation, this one was begotten. So the one who's going to be seated at God's right hand has always existed. He existed before anything else came into being. So the Septuagint, which is prior to the Masoretic text, the Septuagint renders it that he was begotten. And by the way, the Hebrew there, if you're just looking at the consonantal text, would most naturally make you think of Psalm 2. This day have I begotten you. It's the same term. So what happens is, when you look at the Masoretic choice there, I challenge you to go pick up, I don't mean this like in a combative way, but just as an exercise, right? Go pick up any commentator on Psalm 110:3, and you're going to see them all saying the Hebrew here is gibberish. The Hebrew here is unintelligible. The Hebrew here, it's problematic. Even the English translations that are based on the Masoretic text have to supply things, because it just doesn't really make sense. So it's one of those places where it just looks like the rabbis didn't know what to do, other than, we can't let it stand as written, so we're going to put these other vowels in there. So, okay, so now when you talk about the translations of Aquila, Symmachus, and Theodotion, those are all post-Christian Jewish translations. So the Septuagint, the value of the Septuagint is it reflects Jewish interpretation before Jesus, before there's an axe to grind. Aquila, Symmachus, and Theodotion represent post-Christian efforts to, cancel this out. And so, Aquila is explicitly mentioned in the Talmud and other Jewish sources. And the whole point with respect to Aquila's translation is that it was to provide a translation that would take the sting out of the Christian use of the Septuagint. So, I mean, the whole point here is that it's the same stream of Judaism that produces the Masoretic text. So I don't see them as really. What were you going to say?
I was just saying, okay, just giving my 2 cents. I understand what you mean. That it makes sense that
Does that answer your question?
Go
okay.
ahead. Yeah, it does. It does. Thank
Okay.
you.
Good.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yep,
Yeah.
I can hear you. We were just talking over each. I just want to know if that sufficiently answered your question.
Yeah, it did.
All right.
I understand, the point of post-Christian bias. So
Yeah.
Again, thank you both for the influence, and God bless you guys in Jesus' name.
You
God
too.
bless you too. And thank you for hopping on. Appreciate it. All right. All right. Well, we almost are at 2 hours. I haven't done a 2 hour thing in a long time. Only with you. We do long things
Yeah.
all the time. Well, I appreciate it. Guys, thank you so much for watching. It's always a pleasure to have Anthony. I hope you guys go to his channel and check out his long form videos. He gets into such deep issues, regarding a wide range of topics. And he's come on the channel before. You might want to check out some of those past interviews as well. Anthony, would you like to say, as we close, anything to the audience, something coming up that they should know about, anything along those lines?
Well, quick reminder of what you pointed out at the beginning, that you and I will both be in North Carolina somewhere
Concord, I think it was.
in the middle of May. So if
Yeah.
they go back to the beginning of the video,
Yeah. I played a trailer, guys, and so there was a barcode that you could scan if you're interested in coming to this event where Anthony and I will be.
And I'll be doing a debate with C.L. Edwards. He is an interesting fellow. He converted to Christianity from Salafi Islam years ago and then went back to Islam. And so we're going to be debating. What are your topics? I haven't seen the list of.
I've been so busy, I don't know yet. I'm actually intending to look at the text tomorrow so that I can put in some time to prepare. So I've been having so much stuff. I've got another event coming up, so I have to stop, clear my mind, and make sure I sufficiently prepare for it. So otherwise, I'm just going to be getting up there and doing magic tricks.
Right. Well, maybe we'll do a co-act or something, because
there you go.
I'm sure he's going to make me. So my experience is, which doesn't mean that you have to worry about this, but in my experience, I've been told you're going to speak on this and this, and then I get there and I'm told, oh, and this, and this, and I think, you think we just, wake up.
I do think people think that about us. I remember back when I first started YouTube, my schedule was really tight because I was doing youth ministry, because I work for a church and I was a full-time teacher. And then I had to help with home. And then my wife would be like, oh, okay, we're done here. You can go and make a video now. I'm like, what? Just sit in front of the camera and start talking. I think people think that we just it just randomly comes out. It takes some preparation. So
yeah, I mean, it's different. Like if you're in a conversation, that takes care of itself. Thoughts come to you, and that's a different sort of thing. But if you've got to speak for a lengthy bit of time, you at least want to organize maybe some bullet points in your head, if nothing else. And I mean,
right.
So anyways, yeah. And I've had other occasions where I don't know which is worse, just being told to talk about something, or being told that you've got like 20 minutes less than you planned for. Because what I've experienced is I'll be making points along the way, and then I think, okay, I got to cut this down. So I'll take this out. I'll take this out. But then I get down the road and I want to sort of tie something off, and I realize, wait a minute, there's nothing to tie together here. There's not, because I took out this point and it was necessary for this. And now I got to say, oh, I meant to say that. And anyways, we'll be there. I'm sure we'll be prepared. But
if I looked at the flyer correctly, I think Matt Slick is going to be there on one of the days. It might be wrong. I remember seeing him on the flyer. I'm not sure if it was the same date, but we'll see. I'm looking forward to having a good time.
In person. In fact, you were there. So
I wasn't invited the first time. I came to see you guys, and then I got roped in onto the stage.
Yeah, that was great.
That was fun. Yeah. I still, the thing I remember the most are two things, and I'll wrap things up because I know I said we're going to wrap it up. Two things is the salmon I had at the restaurant, and I had the book with me. I wanted to show Matt, Covenantal Apologetics by Scott Oliphant. And I was like, have you checked this book out? And when I opened it up, an old piece of paper came out right there as I was showing it.
It was a letter from, was it Van Til?
Van Til, yeah. It was a letter written by Van Til that apparently I had somewhere, and I used it as a bookmark and forgot it was there. It was like a full letter. So I thought that was pretty cool. And Matt was like, did you know that was in there? I was like, I had no idea. So that was, it was pretty funny. But all right. Well, guys, if you've enjoyed this discussion, please like the video, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Check out Anthony's channel, keep updated on his debates and things like that. They're a huge benefit for those who want to go deep into these sorts of issues, especially issues defending Protestant Christianity and defending Christianity against Islam. And for myself, I'll be speaking in Tennessee in June. And I'll let folks know about that if anyone is in the area. I'll kind of update folks on that. And if you're looking for a speaker for an event, a conference, or anything like that, that's totally a thing. You can reach out to me at revealedapologetics@gmail.com. Or you can go to revealedapologetics.com and fill out the form on the homepage there. I absolutely love doing YouTube, but my biggest passion is to be able to teach with people in front of me, to see people, to meet people, and to teach in that context. So if you have an event and you're interested in doing that, that's totally a thing. It could totally happen. So, well, that's it for this episode, guys. Thank you so much. And everyone who hopped on with us, we appreciate you guys. Until next time, take care and God bless. Bye-bye.